All right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. We are going to be talking about, of course, the Berry Pickers with the incredible and talented and lovely Amanda Peters.
Yeah. Those are my people. They have to do that.
No. The vibes are good tonight. So this book is now out in paperback. Mm-hmm. We spoke a little bit before when the book was new in hardcover. Then it won the Discover Prize. And has been just sort of steamrolling great success since then. Mm-hmm. So I have to start and say congratulations on everything so far. Mm-hmm. You've got some new stories coming soon for us as well.
I do, and one of them is in the copy here at Barnes & Noble, the special edition. So I didn't have one, so I bought one for myself today. So it's exciting.
Yes. So I want to start by just having us all remember back to when the Berry Pickers first came out, mm-hmm. and now we're here. How has it felt bringing this story to so many people?
Kind of crazy. I'm still waiting for someone to wake me up or pinch me, because it was just a regular old little book, and then Barnes & Noble came into the picture, and then the steamrolling started. And it's just been lovely to have people from all walks of life and all over the world now, because it's being published in 19 other languages besides English currently. So just having those people react to it, especially because it's the Mi'kmaq people. And I kind of love the fact that everybody knows Maine because it's America, but nobody knows the Annapolis Valley, Nova Scotia, and nobody knows the Mi'kmaq people. So I'm pretty excited that the world is getting to know a little part of my world, I guess. Yeah.
It's such a great connection to be able to pick up a book and maybe not know anything about the place that it's set or the people it may feature, but to open that first page and just be like, all right, I'm on a journey now. And the Berry Pickers, I know, has been that for so many people, that they can pick it up and just go, oh, there's a story that I want to know.
Yeah, and I really I was just telling this story earlier. I went to do NSCC, which is a Nova Scotia community college where I live. They invited me last Friday to speak to their students, new Canadians who are learning English so they can build up their skills to apply to college and university. And they read my book. And for some of them, it was like the first book they'd ever read in English. And it was just so nice seeing them say, oh, we didn't know about the Indigenous peoples, and now we're reading that, and we didn't know about this, we didn't know about... And it was just so lovely to have them relate to it. And then they said, I can kind of understand that. I see that. Because I can also see something similar in my culture, which I said, yeah, because literary fiction is about humanity, so everybody can find something that relates to them in it. So I really... That was so fun for me just to have those students. Although one gentleman did not like the book. And he was not afraid to tell me. But I said, that's okay. You don't have to like every book you read. That's just the way the world goes.
And I love getting to be that his confidence that he was like, no, I'm going to say it. Mm-hmm. That's important.
Yep. And he just said it. He's like, I liked it some, and then I got here. I don't like it anymore. I was like, okay, that's fine. As long as you read it. He's like, I did learn English. So I was like, okay, good. You learned some English.
A silver lining.
Yeah.
I think something that makes the Berry Pickers so special and so easy to connect to is our incredible characters. Mm-hmm. And their voices that just like reach through the page and take you on their journey through a lot of ups and downs. And sometimes we like our characters more than other times. But I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about the main voices in the story and how they came to you.
Yeah. So when I was thinking, well, the story was inspired by my dad. And his stories, because he was a berry picker, and my whole family went to Maine in the 60s and 70s and picked berries. So they kind of was like inspired by my dad. And originally it was only Joe. I only was going to write the story about Joe. There was no Ruthie or Norma in it. And about 3 chapters in, it was just like a nagging voice in the back of my head saying, I have my own story to tell. I didn't know if she did or not, so I did the most scary thing you can do as a writer and sit down in front of a blank computer screen. And I have an iMac, so it's a big blank computer screen. And I was like, okay, does she have a story? And 12 hours later, there was a little bit of a story there. So I was like, okay. And then I wrote Joe's story, and then I wrote Ruthie's, because I couldn't write them together because of their voices, so I needed them to be separate. And I wrote them separately, and then I put it together like a puzzle. And people always ask me, are they based on real people? And they're not. They are out of my imagination, although Joe is my grandpa's name. So I did that to honor him, because he was the Lewis. If you've read the book, he was the Lewis in the family, which was his dad's name. So I just kind of honored my family a little bit in small, tiny ways. But it is fiction, unless you ask my aunties, and it's all about them.
Of course, there's always someone who reads very closely.
Oh, and the one auntie who thinks it's all about her hasn't even read it. Her daughters told me. Yeah.
So she just knows.
Yeah, she just knows it must be about her. That's what happens when you come from a family of six uncles, a dad, and 7 aunts. So they have their own ideas.
And there's a lot of family in this book. Mm-hmm. It is a book, I think, at its core, so much about family, what it means, how it connects us, and also how it sort of keeps us apart in ways as well. But there are so many threads that weave through that really tell a big story on family.
Mm-hmm. She's not even looking at her notes. Anybody notice this? I'm so impressed. Yeah, it is about family, and that was what it was supposed to be. It was the intent of the book. I read my Goodreads. Yeah, I know you're not supposed to do that. I know.
Your team is like, don't do that.
I think it's funny. But people are like, this isn't a mystery. I'm like, of course it's not a mystery. So it was written as what happens to a family when one terrible event happens, right? And the ripple effect of that. That was the intent when I was just talking about Joe. But then after Norma came in, what is the ripple effect on that family too? Because there is one, right? Lenore can't actually love this daughter the way she thought she could because of what she's done. And she's ironically so afraid to lose her that she can't give her the love of this stolen child. So yeah, it's all about family. I've had people ask me if I like my mother because of Lenore, and I do. But I told her that, and she's like, we have had our moments. But what mother-daughter pair don't have their moments? I have 2 moms. I have a stepmom, too, and I love them both. So, yeah, it's all about family. And people do ask me if there's all these issues in my family. Sometimes on book clubs, you get certain people. I'm trying to put this politely. I had a gentleman tell me that he knows that a lot of Indians are drunks. And is that my personal experience in my family? And I was like, actually, my white family are hardcore alcoholics and not my indigenous family. So no, that's just a story. That's a story. So yeah, there's some weird questions you get sometimes like that. But yeah, it is about family. It's about family love and coming together, and that indigenous people can have loving, joyful families.
And something I love so specifically within that family in this story is the relationship between parents and their children. Mm-hmm. There are, again, a wide sort of swath of these relationships. And I have to say, the last time we talked, we couldn't really do spoilers because the book had maybe not even come out yet. But there's going to be a little bit more in this conversation. So buckle up, everybody. But between, of course, Ruthie and her parents, mm-hmm. between Norma and her parents, mm-hmm. Joe and his daughter, even Ruthie as a mother, there are these things that really web off and connect in these beautiful ways, because so much of this is about those relationships and how important they are.
Mm-hmm. You could ask me a question.
Oh, I don't know. Do you have thoughts? I just would love to hear your thoughts about how those relationships came to you. How did you form them?
Yeah.
Because they're so profound.
So I'm gonna be smart right now. Ooh. Not like smart, but like smart. I recently heard that a very famous writer, when he gets these kind of questions, says, "You sound like you're trying to write an English essay." So that's for you to decide, not for me.
All right. I can give you my thoughts too. I brought notes.
But that's just what I'm going to say when I want to get out of a hard question. But yeah, I don't know. When you sit down to create as a writer, are there any writers in the crowd? Yeah, writers. You'll know, right? I know you're a writer. Sometimes you just sit down and it comes out and you don't know where it comes from. I was talking to a friend of mine who I had given my short story collection to years ago, because the short stories were actually written before the Berry Pickers. And I gave them to him, and I said, I just want to make sure I'm not breaking protocol because they're all Indigenous stories. And we have protocol in Mi'kmaq culture, as most Indigenous cultures do, about what stories you can tell, when you can tell them, how you can tell them. And he brings it back to me and he says, no, you're not breaking protocol. And these are your stories. This is how you are Mi'kmaq. And I totally forgot my train of thought. I was going somewhere with that. This is what happens when you're 47 and in menopause. And he just, what was it?
We're talking about parents and
Parents.
children.
Yeah, he said something like that. Oh, so where do stories come from? He said, and I said, I don't know where they come from. He says, I believe the ancestors give them to you, and it's your responsibility to tell them. And in my head, I was like, that's a good reason as any, and I think that makes more sense than most. I always say they come from the creative ether, the stories do. So I don't know how I make those webs. I don't do it intentionally. I don't sit down to write. I was recently doing a talk with Morgan Talty. Any Morgan Talty fans here? If you're not, you should be. So he released his new novel, Fire Exit, in Bangor, and he asked me to come up and do his release with him. And someone asked him something from the crowd, and he goes, writers don't write a theme. We don't sit down with an intent. We just sit down to create. I was like, I am stealing that. Because sometimes I don't know how to answer these questions because I literally just sit down in front of a computer and stuff comes out. Yeah.
I think that is such an important way to look at creativity because I think there are a lot of people. I have friends that are writers or, I talk to other people who are starting in this world and they want to know and they feel like there's such a formulaic way you have to do it. They get in their head, that if I wake up every day and I sit down and I do this, this, and this must be what's going to happen. Right. And of course there are a million ways that the journey can go. And there's no maybe right or wrong way, but to sort of say there is a freedom to letting your own story be told and that you can't tell someone else's story and that you can't tell a story that's not meant for you, but the story that you have will find its way.
Yeah, you're like challenging me this evening and I haven't had any wine yet.
I'm so sorry.
I don't know how to respond.
I mean, I think it's just important for writers to hear, and for people to.
And everybody has their different process, right? Everybody has a completely different process when they write. I haven't written anything in months because I've been on tour, and I teach. I teach university, so I haven't written anything. I can edit in short little bursts, but for me to write, I need like full days. I'm a person who sits down at my computer at 7 a.m. with my coffee, and I quit around 7 p.m. And that's how I operate, and that's how I will write. A lot of that gets deleted because it's really not good. But I have to keep going. I know friends who personally can sit down and write for 10 minutes at a time and then walk away. I'm like, how do you do that? I'm just getting warmed up by then. I have other friends who get up at 5 a.m. and write for 2 hours because they have children. I don't have children. So I just have a dog who needs to go in and out every once in a while. So I have that freedom to sit at my desk for long periods of time. So when someone says, what's your process and does that work for you? I'm like, yeah, it works for me, but it's not going to work for everybody. Everybody just has different ways they work. Yeah. Yeah. Kind of get to your...
Yeah.
Like, I always ask, did I answer your question? Because I babble a lot.
No, I mean, I just want to pick your brain and talk. This is the best part for me. I know. Get ready. But can we talk a little bit about your teaching and what you get and how that sort of informs your writing career? And do you have great interactions with your students that, like spur your creativity? Or
I do. I love my students. They're fantastic. I really love the job. Everybody's asking me, your book's getting really popular. I think you'll quit your job. I'm like, why would I quit something that I love? People literally pay me to read books, to write books, and to talk about books and talk about writing. I was like, no, I'm never quitting my job. But my students are really great, especially my creative writing students. So I teach English and creative writing. My creative writing students are so engaged and so passionate and so willing to share. And creative writing is a bare your soul kind of process, right? The writers here know that. When I was showing the berry pickers to people, I was like, oh my God, I can't wait. I don't want people to see this because it's something that I created. I used to do international presentations on Indigenous governance and finance. Snoozy, right? And I could do that, no problem, no nerves. The first 6 months when the berry pickers came out, every time I did an interview, I kind of blacked out. I don't remember a thing. It was just so nerve-wracking because it's your soul and it's your heart and it's everything. your creativity, and you're putting it out there for the world. And then you read your Goodreads and you're like, ooh. Someone gave me a 1 star because I didn't like the beveled edges. 1 star. But someone gave me 5 stars just like 2 weeks ago, and the whole review was, you, Lenore. I thought that was hilarious.
I can see that.
Yeah.
Even though I think I said this last time we talked too, I have this weird, strange soft spot for Lenore.
Thank you. Thank you.
That I just can't shake. I just reread the book again, obviously, to have this conversation, and I had it the same thing again. I thought maybe I'll feel differently this way because I know everything that's coming, and yet I just have this thing. Part of it is my grandmother, who's one of the most important people in the world, she had dementia, and the pieces of Ruthie, Norma, and her mother in those moments are like, they just really, there's something special. Yeah,
that I say it's all fiction, but nothing's truer than fiction. Those are the words of Pam Houston. If you don't know her, you should be reading her as well. She said nothing truer than fiction, because I watched my grandmother go slowly with dementia. So I took some of this. So there's part of the book where she's playing with a towel. Yeah, so my grandmother had her towel that she played with in her hand. So I did see that happen to 3 out of my 4 grandparents. So there's a little bit of reality. Everybody uses what they know, right? When they write, they say write what you know, which is 2 kind of meanings. So write what you know is just only write your personal experience, but also bring your personal experiences in. I was just at a master class last weekend with MG Vasiji. I don't know if you guys know him. He's a Canadian Sri Lankan writer. Like, blow my mind that I got to sit with him in a room and talk to him about my writing. And oh my God, I keep forgetting my train of thought here. What was I dementia.
Write what you know.
Write what you know. And he was like, he said that. He's like, don't listen to all these creative writing things. Don't write what you know. Don't tell. He's like, he used a different word than I'm going to use. He's like, ignore it. He used other words for that. Again, it comes back to every writer has their own way of creating these worlds. I'm rambling again, aren't I?
I don't mind. But I do want to talk about Lenore, because
yes, Lenore.
I want to talk sort of about this, what you are so good at with some of your characters, of making us really feel for people, even when on paper we may not, they may not be people that we would say we would be feeling for. But I think that is so important in fiction and in literature, that it allows us these moments, a safe space to say, oh yeah, I can put myself there.
And we're all flawed, right? These are characters that are flawed. Some of them really, really flawed. But who's not without flaws? So again, Pam Houston, and of course you guys know who I'm talking about. She's like, it's really brave you to write a book of all despicable characters. And I was like, they're not despicable.
They're my babies.
They're just flawed. And I wanted people to have like a little bit of empathy, particularly for Jo. For Lenore, it wasn't as intense, but she did what she did because she was mentally ill, and she thought it was right. She had convinced herself, right? And then people come at me with like, I loved Aunt June and now I hate her because she knew the whole time. And I was like, ooh, people are having very visceral reactions to these characters. And I was like, she did, but she also loved her sister, right? I have 3 sisters and a brother. I don't know if I'd like let them kidnap a kid and hide it, but this is not 1960s. Maybe it was different back then, especially when it was a brown child and a white family. So but I did want people to feel for Lenore. I kind of wanted them to have, and you're kind of the first person who ever admitted it, that they had a little bit. She doesn't get her redemption, right? All the other characters except for her and Frank actually have a little bit of redemption at the end, but she doesn't. I don't know how I feel about that, but there it is. It's out in the world now. Can't change it.
I think that's also just sometimes how life is. You know, sometimes you get that and sometimes you don't. And I think another important thing that your characters really show us is they all have a lot of choice. They all really exercise choice. And again, sometimes for better or worse, but nothing feels inevitable in a way that, about in life, you don't want to, I think most of us don't want to feel like we're rushing towards something with no way to change it or stop it or turn the car around. And I think your characters really have that you feel that agency in them.
Oh, that's good. I like that. choice. I always say that Joe, his choice to leave was the ultimate act of love. And some people agree with me, and a lot of people don't. But he loves his family. He did a terrible thing. I think we could all acknowledge he did a very terrible thing. But his response to that was to remove himself from his family so it would never happen again. And to me, that was an act of love. And that was a choice he made to remove himself. I think it was a good choice. Maybe not for so long, but he could have gone to his father's funeral. But I say that, and I wrote it, so.
At the end of the day, you have to say, I did it. So,
And life isn't neat and tidy, right? Life does not come packaged and with a nice little bow. Although I went to Macy's today and everything was nice, packaged with nice little bows. But life is not like that. Life is complicated. Life doesn't always turn out exactly the way we want it to. And I kind of wanted to reflect that in a book, that everything's not just going to turn out hunky-dory. Although my old boss at my previous job, she called me and said, if they do not meet up in the end, I'm going to fire you. And I knew she couldn't because there's people above her. But she called me back like 3 hours later. She's like, you're safe, you're good. I was like, okay.
You're like, all right, well, just
Sweet.
trust the process.
Whew.
Yeah. I think, too, right off of that, directly following choice, I guess, sort of for these characters is the idea of forgiveness and grief and sometimes also regret, and how tightly all those things sometimes sit together.
Yeah, a lot of people say it's really grief. Like, this much grief can't happen to one family. I was like, what? You must be insane. I had my great aunt, her daughter had a brain aneurysm and died in the kitchen. Her husband went to try to pick her up and died of a heart attack right there. These things happen in families. In my other side of my family, my dad's family, two of my uncles were murdered within a 4-year period, or one had a car accident and the other one was murdered. It happens. People have family tragedies. They can clump together, especially when you come from massive, or it's just data, it's just stats. You're going to have more opportunities for sadness. So there's a lot of grief. There is a lot of grief. But also I wanted people to know that there is joy. So I sprinkled joy and I sprinkled a little humor throughout, because a lot of times Indigenous literature gets pegged as trauma, right? It's all about trauma. Indigenous people are just, that's all they are. And they're not. We are not. I say they. We are not. We have joy. We have family. We have love. So I hope that comes through as well as the grief and the trauma and the weightiness of the story, I guess.
That's next in my notes. Don't worry, everybody.
Look at me.
Yes.
I've done this once or twice.
The joy in this book, the palpable moments that stick with me, there's two that I come back to again and again, and it's the karaoke and the cry laughing siblings in the car, because I think those moments where you like completely lose yourself in laughing, in joy, even when you're not even sure what you're laughing about anymore, they just stick with you in a way. And having that scene be, I think, where, at least for me as a reader, Ruthie clicks back in to the family, and you feel this like sigh of relief amongst her family that this is where she's meant to be. It's one of my favorite parts of the entire book.
It's my I have fun writing it too, and she pees on her shoes. I laughed so hard. I was like, I'm gonna make her pee on her shoes. That's hilarious. But yeah, there's nothing better than a good belly laugh with the people you love, right? It just has a way of, I don't know, softening things, making it easier to make those connections once you've had a good hearty laugh together. And the karaoke too, that was fun. I remember in Indigenous families and cultures, there's a lot of humor even in death. My grandmother's funeral, the night of it, we all got together at my dad's house and we told stories and we laughed and we cried, and there was a telescope that was looking at Mars that night. So yeah, there was lots, and we just laughed and told stories, and we were joyful. So, there's things going on right here.
There's things going on. We've got some questions.
So we often deal with even heavy things with laughter. So I wanted to make sure that was in there because that was Alice's funeral, right? So even then, there's still joy and there's still laughter.
And I love that because I think it that is such a human thing. Everyone has sort of experienced that. And I think it balances these moments where, yes, there are incredible tragedy. And most people, I think, have probably lived that.
Mm-hmm.
But people have also lived those incredible joys. And I think the choice to exist in that and to focus on those moments comes through in the characters.
Oh, good.
You did. Here's a question from our lovely audience. How do you separate the choices you know the characters are going to make versus the choices that you, as the writer, wish they would make? Do you ever have moments where you maybe wish you could do one thing, but you know the story has to go another way, or do you just surrender yourself to it?
I just let the story do its thing. I just surrendered to the story. There was no time in the story where I was like, should this choice be made here? It was always the way it was supposed to go. I'm not going to say that's going to work in every story I tell. I'm working on a new novel right now, kind of button heads with my editor on it. So I'm just on the story I want to tell and where it goes. So you just never know. Good question, though.
I wonder, too, as you've sort of moved through all of these things into character, one of my other favorite pieces of the book and something that has stuck with me is the character's relationship with nature and how you use nature to show connection, how you use nature to show a passage of time. And I think that it really just operates sort of in this current in the background that we're always connecting to the natural world.
Oh, yeah. We have a phrase, well, most indigenous, in Mi'kmaq, it means Nogama, which means we are all related. And that means everything that's living. And even the Mi'kmaq language is a verb-based language, so it's a living language. There are very, very, very few nouns, like everything is living. Even the word for God is not. Depending on where you put a letter in the word, it's to be created, to be part of creation, to have created. It's a constantly moving, evolving thing. And I was talking to my friend Michelle Porter, who's a Métis writer. She wrote a book called A Grandmother Begins the Story. And in her book, the land is actually a character, like has agency, speaks to you in the book. And I just loved how she did that. And I asked her, we were in conversation once for a festival, and we had a conversation about how as Indigenous people, we don't separate ourselves from the land. It's just not something we do. And again, I didn't intend to do that. I'm pretty sure it's in the DNA. It just comes out that way. It wasn't something I sat down and said, must include land, must include nature. It just happens. Yeah.
And I think you can feel that in the story, that it doesn't feel like you are writing a book about the land in a way. You know, it's not like this is a story of nature. It's, of course there is nature here. Of course this connection exists. And I think the cultural pieces that you're able to put in for readers who many, I would assume, have no real frame of reference for the Mi'kmaq culture, and yet you're able to just sort of say, here it is. And we've got some questions about how it felt to be able to bring those pieces of your culture and your family and your heart, your soul to an audience.
Yeah, that was great. I love that. Is that the question, or are you going to read off those things?
That's the question. I think that as readers, I don't know, I assume many of you are like this, that for me as a reader, one of my favorite things is to be able to learn something, whether that's about, factual things, just about a culture I don't know, or an emotional thing, a lesson that sits with me. And I think both are present in the Berry Pickers, but that is just something that sticks so much to me as someone going into this world now, that we have to keep that in our literature. We have to keep those things right now.
Yeah, and when I do like events, especially in the U.S., everybody's like, we didn't even know you existed. I'm like, we do, 60,000 strong. And they're Mi'kmaq in the U.S., I'm pretty sure half the Mi'kmaq are actually born in Boston. But yeah, it's just nice to have that reaction that people are like, oh, we researched you. We researched the Mi'kmaq. It's like, oh, that's so exciting. And when I tell other Mi'kmaq people that, they're like, that's cool. Because, yeah, we are very small and very tiny portion, but we're still there. And we're going to be there for a very long time.
And as readers, I know for myself, and I see this amongst the people that I know that read voraciously, there is an empathy that you can really, I think, only gain through literature through reading other people's stories.
Yes. And I tell this to my students all the time. And it's being proven scientifically that people who read fiction are more empathetic. They can develop empathy easier. So I would just say, so if you read fiction, technically you're just a better person, right? So, and I had one student debate me on it, and I think I won that one. But I said there's scientific evidence now. Not that we needed that. We know that people who read fiction, as fiction readers, if you're here, I'm assuming you might be a lover of fiction, that you get to experience other cultures and you can't, I say experience, you can't actually become culturally like solid in them, but you can step in their boots for a couple minutes, I like to say. I really like Indian Canadian writing, as in Indian Canadian writing. And I really love that. And I was like, I've been to Mumbai and I've been to Delhi. I've never been to any of these places, but I have in the books, right? And I just love that. And yeah, it's such a good thing to want to learn and use fiction as a vehicle for it.
Do you feel like you learn as you write as well about yourself or doing research?
Oh, yeah. Writing The Berry Pickers was actually therapeutic for me. Just coming into my own as... I'm obviously mixed race. I'm called white passing in Canada. Is that a thing here? You say white passing? Yeah, I'm white passing. So I never kind of understood where I belonged, because in some instances you're like, am I Indigenous here or am I white here? Because I'm actually both, shockingly enough. There's a new short story in my collection that's coming out, and it's called Angry White Indian. And it's about a girl sitting at a bar when a man makes a very racist remark and looks at her as if she's supposed to agree with him. Because that's happened to me lots of times, because I'm white passing. So again, I forget where I was going with that. See, my train of thought goes all over the place.
I'm just talking about learning as
so learning about myself, especially when writing that. So I became much more comfortable in who I am by writing The Berry Pickers. I think it's because I put all of my self-doubt onto Norma, so I kind of got rid of it, and here you go. You can have it now, and she's in a book, and I can move on. But yeah, really, really good question. And I'm really happy that I've come to this place in my life, even though it's very late in my life. I'm not really late. I'm 47. I'm not like on the cusp. But I feel like I'm finally comfortable with myself. And it took me a long time, and it took me writing The Berry Pickers to actually get there.
I feel like this book has a lot of your soul in it in a way.
Yeah, that's why it was so terrifying for go out into the world, and then knowing that people actually read it. Because in my mind, my mom would read it, my dad would read it, a few Nova Scotians might read it, and I would go on with my life. And now 19 languages, Barnes & Noble, Discovery Prize, craziness. So yeah, people are reading it, and there is a lot of my soul in there.
People are reading it, and I think they're putting a piece of their soul in it too. I think that's one of the best things, like when I read a book and I feel like I can, even though it's an experience that's totally different from one I've had, I feel like I can put a little bit of myself in to get something out.
Yay, that's good. I said that to the students that I was talking about earlier, the English students. They were like, why didn't you clarify this? Why didn't you clarify that? I was like, because you can bring your own experiences to this. If a book tells me everything detail by detail by detail, I don't want to read it. If there's not room for my imagination, for me to take my experiences and visualize what this person looks like and what they do, I don't want to read that. So I told them, I don't know. What did happen there? One of them asked me if the woman in the grasslands is a ghost. I'm like, I don't know. Maybe she is, maybe she isn't. It's up to you.
I think that's the fun of reading, the joy of it. Yeah. I mean, I know sometimes it's hard to, I think maybe for myself to be like, there's this book with tragedy and loss and whatever, but to find joy while I read it. But I think there is something, even in the saddest of stories or the hardest things, there's a joy in getting to create that world while you read it or while you write it.
Yeah, there's also some weirdness. Like I actually cried while I wrote spoilers are okay. So yes, spoilers are okay this time around. Charlie died. And they're leaving to come back to Nova Scotia. And I'm like crying writing this. I'm like, you don't have to do this. You are the creator of this. I was like, no, this came to me for a reason. There's a reason why this has to happen. So I just let it go. In my new short story collection, there's a story in there that I wanted to pull completely because it touches on some violence and it's a little bit brutal. But there are missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls all over North America who have experienced that. So my friends convinced me to leave it in, even though I find it like a little bit like, ooh, ouch. It's still in there.
Can we talk a little bit about the new story collection?
Sure can.
Do you want to tell us about it?
Sure. It's called Waiting for the Long Night Moon. It's out in Canada. Came out in August. It'll be out here February. Thank you, Rachel. I keep telling everybody January. People so upset. But yeah, pre-order. Yeah, that's a good idea. It's just a collection. I think there's 17 stories, 18 stories. I can't remember. Some of them are flash fiction, which are really short, like 750 words. And they just span the Indigenous experience. And I wrote them all before the Berry Pickers, one or two of them during, when I was getting sick of the Berry Pickers and needed something else to work on. And they were all inspired by different things. Like there's one called The Birthing Tree that was inspired by my grandma, who was suffering from dementia at the time. And it was my weekend to stay with her because my grandpa was in a home and we all took turns. And there are many of us. Like I said, my dad's 10 of 14 kids. There's like 70 first cousins. So we all took our turns. And she just looked at me. She's like, you know that big tree down by the water? And I was like, I do, Nan. She goes, that's where the Mi'kmaq women used to give birth. And then she just went away again. And I've held that in my head for 27 years. And then a short story came out of that. Another one is I had a dream. Oh, this is the one in the Barnes & Noble one. So I had a dream once when I was very young about, I'm not religious at all, but for some reason at the end of my bed, there was the Virgin Mary. And I could hear a bear trying to get into the house at the same time. And I remember that dream for like 25 years. And there's a short story that I just used that as a basis of. So you never know where they come from. They're all about the Indigenous experience. There's some about residential schools. I know you guys say boarding schools. We say residential schools. There's one about the fight for clean water, which people are like still questioning why you need to do that. I don't know. Why do you need clean water? In Canada, we have 60 First Nation communities who have a boil order, one of them for over 40 years now. So we need clean water. Yeah, there's a slew of them. And they're not all depressing. Some of them are very happy and joyful. Some of them, I had an interview with a woman who said, a lot of your stories, nothing really happens. And my heart started racing. Like, where's she going with this? Because I'm live on Zoom. It's just, but they're still good. I was like, oh, thank goodness. But yeah, they're not like plot driven or anything. There's one about a grandmother, a mother, and a little girl who go to pick sweetgrass, which is very, very important for the people of the Dawn, which are the Mi'kmaq, or the people of the Dawn. Very important, passing on the traditions. So yeah, there are joyful ones. And the last one is about resilience and joy and taking back our culture. So I said, there's apparently a process to ordering short stories that I didn't know about until I wrote short stories. And it's pretty intense. And we went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. I said, I don't care. I want Begabog as the first story because it's the first story I ever wrote that I was proud of. And I want A Strong Seed as the end because it ends on joy and resilience and happiness. But yeah, it's weird to have another one come out. It's just like nerve-wracking, but also exciting.
It's going to be great. I can't wait for people to get more stories and more a glimpse into this world yet again. And I have to say, as I was rereading The Berry Pickers, I had such a connection to the joy in the story this time. Yeah. And as I was finishing it, I got one of my favorite feelings from ending a book, which is, I know they're going to be okay.
Yeah. Oh, yay.
And I think that as we read so often that I ask people, oh, do you miss the characters when you're done writing? Do you miss the characters when you're done reading? And sometimes I'm like, oh yes, I wish I knew what they were doing, all this. And I do wish that for these characters, but I also know that they're okay.
Yeah, I've been asked if there's a sequel. I'm like, no, there's no sequel to The Berry Pickers. It is what it is because they're going to be okay. Yeah, Norma finally has everything she's ever wanted in life. She has family. She has a niece that looks just a little bit like her. So yeah, I think they go on. And again, I said to people, I was like, use your imagination. What do you think happens to them? Right? Because it does end, even though it's like a kind of a sad book, it does end on a very happy note. Yeah.
And I think that really encapsulates this whole thing. I mean, we go on, we struggle, but hopefully we get to end on a happy note. And I feel now like I'm going to end this on our happy note.
Yay.
This has been so great. I'm so glad we got to talk about this book again. I can't wait for more people to get their hands on it now in the paperback and on the short stories when they come. So thank you so much, Amanda, for joining us.
Thank you for coming. Sorry about my brain not functioning that well.
Thank you all for being here. We're going to be doing some signings, some chatting. So thank you all.